Now I want to bring in the man that single-handedly destroyed the Diddy prosecution and let him walk. This is Joe from Good Logic. Joe, you were on the scene, passing notes to the prosecution, giving them bad information to ensure that Diddy would escape the trafficking charges. What is your reaction? And then obviously we may have some breaking news during the stream because they're set to reconvene this afternoon, and
he may walk free. He may walk out.
Well, he won't walk free, but he may be released.
Yeah.
Joe, what's your actual lawyer, Joe? What's your take on this?
My take on this is that he's probably technically guilty under the law. If you really look at the technical breakdown of what the law says and what the jury charges says and the evidence that was adduced at trial.
Of which charges? All of them?
I would say of RICO and sex trafficking Cassie.
Okay. Yeah.
As well as the two he was convicted on. But this was not a jury. The longer this trial was going on, the longer that this thing was happening, the worse and worse it was becoming for the government. This case, if they had just brought out the first 5 witnesses and rested there, said to hell with Jane, which I want to point out to you, the first indictment, nothing about Jane. They had a superseding indictment, nothing about Jane. The only time that they brought a second superseding indictment, which brought in counts 4 and 5 for trafficking Jane, and also for the second one that he got busted on, the 5th charge of interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution. Those only came up after Jane told them a story in like March or April of this year that no one had ever heard before, about how she had been violently assaulted by Diddy on June 18, 2024, 1 year ago. And
that would have been after the Cassie beating, right?
Oh, yeah. The Cassie split from him in 2018. So her relationship, we knew, came years after. That was never a thing. But with everything all the stories that came out, even with people talking to the police all the time, she spoke to the police many, many times. And it was only after she had spoken to them like 10 times, 15 times that she came forward with this story, which I'm going to tell you, the way she tells the story, it has credibility to it. But the problem that you have with Jane is that she's too much into the whole, this is what you do for your lover. This is what I do for my partner. My partner wants me to, I'm trying to please my partner. And that's all well and good. And he degraded the hell out of her. And he's a douchebag for the way he treats humans, men and women. But she's basically admitting, I agreed. You know, stupidly, but I agreed. And if you agreed, you're not being trafficked. A lot of people agree to crap in relationships that they regret later on, you know, but that doesn't mean that the person who manipulated them into it has now committed some sort of federal crime that has a 15-year maximum in life. That sounds crazy. And once they brought her in, I think that everything, the jury, and I think everyone watching was just like having more and more questions about these charges in general. And the free Diddy voices in and around the courtroom started becoming far more prevalent and far more prouder to say that they need to let him walk on anything that, you know, any of these main charges.
Well, and how big do you think that text message was from Cassie saying like, hey, when can we get another freak off? Like, I felt like that text basically killed the trafficking on Cassie too. Like, I know there's more to it. You covered it more in depth, but if you're looking at that, it's like, well, she wanted it, right? Like she was actively pursuing it.
That had to play a role. It wasn't just one. There were many text messages where she is very explicit and graphic about what she would like to do with various men. Now, in her testimony, she said that she was the only reason she wrote that stuff, which reads like a porn, you know, it reads like a graphic novel. One of
Hannah Claire's novels that she keeps.
Hey, do not disparage me. Not in front of a lawyer.
That she said that she was, you know, she knew what he wanted to hear and that she wanted to please them. And you can understand that, you know, you can understand that people will do things that will say things they don't really mean and sort of present a fantasy for a significant other that
trying to make it work. Yeah.
Which is not necessarily reflective of what they're actually thinking and feeling. So, But when you're looking at it from a jury's perspective, it's like, are you sure beyond the reasonable doubt that there wasn't some sincerity behind it? And if you're not sure, then in that case, technically, you can say that she's not being trafficked. The problem from Diddy's perspective, and the reason that the state was trying so hard here and trying to zero in on, let's get one incident here that we can say she's definitely trafficked here. There's definitely, you cannot deny that this is a time that she did not want to do this, and that she's clearly being forced, where he's blackmailing her, beating the hell out of her, which has never happened with Jane, only Cassie. But that we see this one incident, and boom, for that, let's convict Diddy. And they likely did that. But with all the conflicting stuff, and especially with Jane getting $30 million, the very dollar amount that she felt was justice. So now, from the jury's perspective, they're not looking to punish him, even though he was exposed for being a dirtbag to people and women in particular. But they're not looking to hang his scalp on a wall, because they're basically like, she seems conflicted. She's like, it was some of the best memories of my life and some of the most toxic, traumatizing.
She seemed like she'd go back tomorrow.
She would.
How it seemed to me.
Yeah. Or see him thrown in jail. She seems as if she's actually had pretty good therapy. She's years removed. She's married now, has just had her second baby. When she was testifying, she was a week before she gave birth. Yeah. And she seemed totally at peace with it. And she had demanded that her civil satisfaction was $30 million. The day she filed the lawsuit, the next day, they settled for $20 million. And then she got another $10 million from the Intercontinental Hotel. So from the jury's perspective, she's not demanding justice, and she's gotten her justice. So I can very much understand him saying, even though he's technically perhaps liable, if you read the statute this way, and I don't like reading the statute the way they did, because I think it's a complete inversion of what sex trafficking is. I mean, it's exact opposite. It's backward sex trafficking. But technically, it's a violation. They're like, we're not giving this guy a technical violation and throwing him in jail. That's what I think happened here.
Yeah. How active do you think a lot of these, Casey and this Jane were when it came to procuring a lot of the adult performers? And were you in the courtroom when it was revealed with some of the text messages from Cassie talking about all the guys she's been in when her husband was there? How is that situation? Because a lot of people talk about the awkwardness of the new husband being in there and then seeing all the salacious details of just how down and dirty Casey was really getting.
Yeah, I think you mean
Cassie.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'll tell you that was very unsettling to listen to. That she basically admitted that and this is the weirdest part about Cassie's story. And both these women, when they're talking, they sound very believable. Even on cross, they seem pretty believable.
Yeah, she was pregnant. They had her pregnant on the stand, which is so weird. The optics of it I think the prosecutors were trying to play up on that, but I think it failed.
I mean, the defense asked that she be seated before the jury be brought in at one point. It didn't happen because they didn't want her to see how heavily pregnant she was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that she claimed that I can use the R word on here.
Use whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So she claimed she had been raped by Diddy when she was having a meeting with him for closure, and that a month later she met with him again and consensually had sex.
Right. That was
this is Cassie in a nutshell. This is it's like, which is the problem with her story, is that, like, she's so back and forth. And look, if you ask Dawn Hughes, and frankly, I don't think you should ever ask Dawn Hughes anything, because she thinks that right now Luke is sexually assaulting Hannah, because she thinks every man is misogynistic and every man is abusive to every woman is a victim of abuse. She's the same psychiatrist who still believes Amber Heard. She testified for Amber Heard.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember that woman? You remember that woman?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she thinks Johnny Depp is an abuser. She thinks obviously Diddy is an abuser. And she was the one talking about trauma bonds and stuff like that. And when she talks and isn't really that hard, she can sound somewhat convincing. But she would describe it, if you believe her, she would describe it as that people, victims form a trauma bond. And I think there's some truth to it. We hear about women who who will, basically, we saw what happened with that woman who was kidnapped in the Lindbergh thing, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, what's the thing called?
The liberation
Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean that. Joe, before we get much further, and I won't keep you too long because I know you've got a lot to talk about today. First, can you let the people know out there, and then Mod Neurodivergent, can you put his links in the chat? Let the people know where they can find your content and how they can support you, because Joe covers a lot of legal stuff, and he's a great resource for, obviously all of that stuff going on too.
I like to cover law and politics. My channel name is Good Lawgic, Lawgic, and you can find me on Rumble and YouTube. And on X, I'm at The Following Pro, as in short for my show I host and is called The Following Program. So I couldn't get Graham in there, so it's The Following Pro. So that's where I produce most of my content. I'm also on Locals at goodlogic.locals.com. That's goodlogic.locals.com, spelled like you see it right over here. And yeah, and I really focus on law and politics, where I look at myself as being MAGA's lawyer,
Nice.
and basically breaking down things as they're unfolding and trying to be realistic. I'm someone who thinks that Trump was the greatest president we ever had, but I also think he has flaws and he makes mistakes sometimes. And that
How dare you?
Yeah.
He is not one of us. Kool-Aid
I don't
drinkers.
agree with anything Luke has said in the last 6 months. But
Hey, I predicted that Diddy was going to walk.
Well, he may not. Let me ask. So I have two questions, and I actually want to get your take, because Hannah Claire, you may not know, she's a big true crime buff.
Oh, cool.
And she is absolutely crushed by the plea deal.
Well, hold on.
Brian Kohberger got
a weird classification.
but I wanted to get your take on that before but also, what is your? So now I was looking at the sentences. You tell me if I'm incorrect. Like, he's basically facing like 12 to 40 months or something as a first-time offender for these prostitution charges. I saw somebody say that. What is I don't know if that's true or not, but what is the real? Because in my opinion, he should have a reasonable case for getting off with time served. I mean, he's already been in prison for almost a year, right? Or he's been in 6 months or something like that. He's a first-time offender. Big deal. I mean, I don't mean to minimize it, but like, prostitution, big deal. People don't go to prison for their first offense of prostitution in most cases. What do you think? Obviously, this is like prostitution on steroids, but like, what do you think is likely? What's the maximum he's likely going to face here?
It's a good question.
Maximum he would get, I think they said, is somewhere around 41 months, which would be like 3.5 years or so.
Yeah.
With time served. So, and that would be in federal that would be in Club Fed. He's not going to be going to Oz. So, his life is fine after this verdict. This is a massive, massive win. He gets time served. So it credited toward that whatever sentence, and the sentence could be like half that duration. So it would not be shocking to see him walking free in 6 months to a year. And
you think he'll still do more time though?
I think it's very possible that the judge is not going to want to let him, considering all the admissions of the violence he's done, that the judge is not going to want to just let him go for time served, just so that there's a sense of some justice for the abuse that he heaped on not just these women, by the way, but just this guy, to his workers and stuff like that, that there was
lots of people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He would work his employees for 5 days straight. The drugs that was just through the roof. All this stuff here, I think that the judge is probably going to try and keep him in prison for another 6 months to a year. But I do think that he should grant him bail. I think that bail is very
right, totally.
Yeah.
He should be out today. It's just a prostitution charge.
Yeah, for a hefty fee. I'm saying it's
fine.
Hit him with a bail bond of $1 million, $5 million. Even if it's 10, he can pay that. But this way, he's coming back. He'd be an idiot to actually skip bail, and he's not an idiot. The one thing that anyone who spent 5 minutes watching him or listening to him can appreciate is, as twisted as some of his appetites are, he's an incredibly driven incredibly driven individual who also has a certain genius to him, and that's why.
What would he be running from, Joe? Anyway, like he's running from 6 months.
Yeah,
like big deal.
Yeah,
like he's already done 6. He can just sit in solitary. You know.
I'm just wondering if after he gets out of 6 months of Club Fed, if he's going to be like, deemed all hard. Like he's like, oh yeah. Man. He's
like, I think he probably already thinks that about himself, though. You know?
Oh yeah, look at me. Like I served. Like now he's got his street cred that he's earning for like playing tennis.
He'll have a teardrop tattoo. Yeah.
I feel like the real question is, does he drop a new album? That's always my
100% guarantee.
100 probably from
Before.
prison.
From prison.
Yes.
Yeah, 100% guarantee. So he's going to be. I think you're probably right. The optics of just letting him walk now would be brutal. And while optics aren't a fair reason to be imposing sentences, it's a reality. Just like last night when we talked, Joe, we were like, 4th of July is coming. And like, it's not supposed to wait, but it's gonna.
This guy nailed it. I was on the phone with him last night, and he's like, I'm telling you, by noon tomorrow, we will have a verdict. This jury doesn't want to go into July 4th. Yeah. I'm telling you, they got 4 out of 5 done. There's no way by noon tomorrow that we don't have a verdict. And sure enough, 10:30 a.m.
Within like an
I
hour.
said Wednesday too. I mean, I'm sure they all have plans and fireworks to see and beers to drink and hot dogs to roast or whatever.
Yeah.
What I wasn't sure about was I knew they would decide. Like, Joe actually informed me much better about. Can you explain what I had wrong about the RICO charge?
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh well, if the RICO charge is dependent on these other 2 things, but it's actually more complicated than that.
Much more complicated than that. A lot of people were initially reporting that the state has dropped 3 charges, and that was never true. And
that was the arson. The kidnapping.
Yeah, they said there's no more arson, no more kidnapping, no more sex trafficking. I'm like, what? That doesn't make it. None of this makes any sense because they were, aside from the sex trafficking, these were not charges. They were predicates to RICO. In order to be convicted under RICO, you have to show that within a 10-year period, there are at least 2 different crimes from a multitude of dozens of different categories. Now, when the state is laying that out and saying of all the different possible categories that we can convict for RICO, we think these are the categories that we can prove that he's committed. Now, even within those categories, there are multiple statutes under these categories. So under kidnapping, multiple statutes, under sex trafficking, multiple statutes, under arson, multiple statutes, under obstruction, multiple statutes. All of them have multiple statutes. And if you're caught on any one of those statutes, that's 1, and you only need a second one. And it could be the same. It could be the same thing twice. It could be drug trafficking twice. People ignore this.
So what I got wrong, I was like, oh, they're probably thinking, because I don't remember if I said this to you or not. I feel like I did, but I had a few. I was pretty sure that they were going to convict him on the prostitution, and I incorrectly was like, oh, they can't because he's got 2 prostitution charges. Does that qualify RICO? And you're like, no, you idiot.
Right.
RICO is actually not doesn't work like that. It's everything that they talked about baked into that one charge, and they need just 2 of those.
Yes.
Why do you think they ultimately said no on that? Is it because they only got him on the prostitution? They thought, and they literally said the arson, what happened to the drug charges? Like, how did he get off on those? There was pictures of them. Like that, the drug charges is insane that they had his drug mule there, and they got off on the drug charge. That was one that I was like, that's a slam dunk. How is he not getting that charge?
I can give you 2 completely different answers. One of them is what a legal analyst would say, and then I can tell you what reality is. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. These are 2 completely different
What's
things.
the reality here?
The reality.
No, I want to hear legal analyst first.
The legal analysis is that, well, the jury likely came to the conclusion that this was not a criminal enterprise. And if it's not a criminal enterprise, accordingly, you can't convict him because you have to show that this is all in furtherance of a greater criminal enterprise, and that they didn't feel that Bad Boy Entertainment or Diddy was the hub of some sort of criminal enterprise, and accordingly, that there's no basis to convict under RICO. That's what a legal analyst would tell you.
What really
What's
happened?
reality?
What reality, in my personal opinion, is that this jury did not want to convict him anymore. And they basically said, and they were arguing about, do we have to convict him or not? And they basically had to, because they're like, these charges are
The
crap.
RICO charge was real too. Like that, they did not want to give him 20 years.
Right.
Like that.
And
that was a big charge.
And these charge, and they likely came to the conclusion, and I'm saying this based on the fact that this is the conclusion more and more people were coming to as they were watching this trial, is this is kind of crap. Because they're basically now trying to turn everything this guy's life about was we're as if we're the mafia. It's the same thing you saw them do to Trump. This is RICO charges like this in general. This is not when Congress passed RICO. The thought was not let's try and find
For
ways
individuals.
to convict people.
Yeah.
Let's get one guy. There's no conspirators, which you can technically do that. And what the state was asking them to do was give us this technical thing, because technically we got him. Technically, let's look at it. Technically, he did, and it's true. Technically, he did. But the jury was like, "Yeah, we're not throwing Diddy away for the rest of his life because you managed to catch him on a technicality." That's what I think is what happened here.
For my assessment, looking at this, I mean, a month out, I was saying he's probably going to walk on a lot of the serious charges. They probably won't be able to convict him, because I thought the prosecution did an absolutely horrible job. They were touting themselves as these all-female lead prosecutors, and I'm like, they threw almost everything that they could at him. And then they weren't making good, concise arguments for it. Do you think that assessment was fair to see here? Because, again, a month out, a week out, even yesterday, I was like, he's going to walk. And the serious charges are not there. And I think that's because the prosecution failed.
Well, I think the prosecution's failure was in how they charged, not in how they prosecuted those charges. If you actually watch a trial, and I really try to assess how well or poorly an attorney is doing their job, and there's a lot that if you're doing it the same way if you're a computer game designer, you can see flaws in the game that I might not notice, but to you, you're like, no, this is wrong. So too, if you're a lawyer, this is your specialty. You're like, okay, this is well done. This is poorly done. This is a mistake. This is something they regret. This is something they will regret and don't regret it yet. Or this is walking. They got very lucky here. You can do this for the judge. You can do it for the each side of the. And that's what I try to break down here. And I'll tell you right now that Maureen Comey, who is a loathsome individual, daughter of James Comey, she's a terrible human being. But inside the courtroom, she happens to be a skilled litigator. She knows what she's doing. She can do the most effective direct and cross examinations that I've seen from almost any prosecutor. She's good at what she does, but her charging is twisted and skewed and screwed up in the way that her father is, of like, this is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to go, and these are the charges I'm going to bring, because there's a lot of charges they could have brought and didn't. They thought they were going to get him on these charges. Those other charges were likely to just bring in other people and names that they didn't want brought in. When you first heard the word freak off a year ago.
I know, right, Joe? That's what I was like, where are all these Hollywood people that was participating in this? Yeah. I think they purposely built their charges around having to put those people's names out there. I have no evidence of that, but that's what I believe.
It always seemed like they were trying him for charges that didn't fit the evidence that they were relying on. It didn't seem like a strong comparison to me, but of course you were in the courtroom. Did it feel that way in person?
It felt like they're trying to prove that they got him on this technicality. What do I say that? Because if you look at what sex trafficking is, what sex trafficking is we're trying to stop people who are forcing women to be whores, whether it's, and literally be whores, right? So I don't want to be a whore. No, bam, punch them in the face. That's what we're trying to stop, right? That's it's a horrible thing that people are doing. What is the objective of the defendant in those cases? Every time, it's money.
Say they're willing.
It's money. The reason this person is doing this, the reason the defendant does all these acts is they want to milk the money that this woman is worth to some stranger, and they're going to take the money from them, and they want to pimp them out, and they want to milk the money. That's what sex trafficking crime, which was passed in 2000, was designed to stop. Well, what the hell is this guy doing? What is he doing? He's actually doing the exact opposite. He's burning through money. He's the one paying. This is a complete inversion of what sex trafficking is. But what Maureen Comey did is like, oh, I'm so clever. I'm going to basically say that because sex trafficking is broken up into elements, You have to prove that there's commercial sex. You have to prove that there's force. So now I can say, well, there's force here and there's money going there. So if you read the statute, it's technically a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1591. So now I can throw him in jail for 15 years. And if I can get the judge to agree with it, which the judge and say that this is still classified,
they did agree, right?
And they did. That's why we're going to a trial. Then I have to get a jury to basically say, here, I proved you this element, I proved you that element, now hand me a conviction. And the jury said, no, I'm not giving you that.
Yeah. I mean, these women were able to go on all the social media platforms and all the other kind of prostitute websites, pick out their favorite prostitute, and Diddy would just pay for them. That's what he's kind of convicted of here. That's the trafficking charge here.
Yeah.
When these women were then celebrating and talking about how great all of this was.
Yeah.
Well, and they were, and on the stand, they weren't. On the stand, they were talking about how horrible it was. They were saying no woman wants to have sex while they're on a UTI. No woman wants to have sex for 4 days straight. No woman wants to, and that these freak-offs would go from for Cassie, a minimum of 24 hours and off, and usually somewhere between 24 and 36 hours, and the longest one was 4 days. When you're on your period, you still have to go out there and do a freak-off because Diddy wants it. When does it end? When he says it ends. Why were they doing it? They basically, both of them were doing it because they wanted to be his woman.
Right.
That's
I mean,
what they wanted.
In the trial where they were asking Cassie, like, did you enjoy it or did you say you liked them? And she was like, well, it was the time. That was when I got to spend time with Diddy. So
yes.
I like them in that component.
Yeah. That's
let
exactly
me
right.
let me give Joe another chance to shout out his channel. Everyone who's out in chat, especially the 13, 14, 15,000 on Rumble, go follow his channel. It's
cutting
pinned.
me off when I'm criticizing him.
Sorry. Well, I know he's got a lot going on today.
I'm just kidding.
And I wanted to get his take on Brian Kohberger. Let the people know, do you have like a regular show or do you just let the people know where to find you?
I usually will do a live stream at night, like around 10 o'clock Eastern time, somewhere around between 10 and 10:30 is when I'll usually try to start. And it's like a 2-hour show that I'll do nightly that the recording for one reason or another doesn't raid ever. But yeah,
that's because I'm not live at 9 o'clock before.
Come on, Jeremy.
Damn it. Yeah. So go
live after this and I'll raid you.
Awesome.
Go live after our show.
He just
stay alive and I'll raid you.
He tells us he hates you. That's why he hasn't raided you.
You know
right. Yeah.
Look, I don't really have an issue with you on that. I actually yelled at Tim Pool for that. I was like, Tim, how do I get you to raid me? Because his show is wrapping up.
Oh yeah, IRL
all the time. Yeah. I was like, I could use 40,000 YouTube people popping on over to my channel. But yeah.
Well, if you go live after this, I will raid you. You can find him at. Well, go ahead. Tell the people to find you, and then I would, if it's okay, if you have time, I'd like to get your take on the
Brian
Kohberger plea deal because I think there's very few times where we've seen something like this ever happen.
Yeah. Well, okay. So my channel is Good Lawgic, LAWGIC. I'm on Locals at goodlogic.locals.com. I'm on Rumble at Good Lawgic, all spelled like this, Good Lawgic. I'm also on YouTube at Good Lawgic, and on X, I am at The Following Pro, but everyone calls me Joe. So
make sure you go follow his channel and tune into his live stream tonight. Joe, what do you think? Hannah Claire, see, we might have a potential crossover here because Hannah Claire wants to, there's a lot of people that cover true crime, but like a lot of them are also kind of leftoid dorks. There's not a lot of like right-leaning people that cover true crime. She's a big true crime head and creates content around it. I was actually going to send her to Idaho to cover the case at my expense. And I didn't have the money, so I got him to take the plea deal. But
that's what happened here. When I first started working with Jeremy, I told him like my background and stuff, but I was like, just so you know, I'm really interested in this case. I'm going to go. And he was like, okay, I support you. I can help you be a part of this. And it's really messed me up professionally that he's taken this plea because I had plans. What do you make
you
of
and
it?
You and me both. Do you know how rich this trial was going to get me? No.
Yeah, the trial would have been, bonkers. Yeah.
I recorded from, the boys already know this, but I recorded from the set I had specifically built to cover this trial. It was like a super in morning. I mean, what do you make of this? It's 2.5 years in. We're 6 weeks away from the new trial start dates, August 18th. And then it's suddenly a plea deal's on the table. Some of the families are really angry. What do you think happened?
I'm going to ask you this question.
Okay.
You're a true crime fan, so I'm going to ask you, are you positive that the state hasn't dead to rights?
Oh, here we go.
Thank you for asking me this important
She
question.
thinks that they don't. She thinks that there's a lot of questions in the case.
I do. I really do. The thing is, you know, when it started, it seemed like when he got arrested, seemed reasonable, right? The knife sheath, whatever. And as the 2 years have gone out, it doesn't seem strong. And even Xander Kronodal's aunt, when she was talking to TMZ, was like, they didn't tell us about this. And then also they guaranteed us they had a slam dunk conviction. Why would they offer up a plea deal or agree to a plea deal if it was broached by the defense, if they knew they could get him, especially when the majority of the family seemed to want the death penalty?
Well, the argument is that, I mean, the cynic would say that they don't want to waste the money, and that if you get
when has that ever stopped them before?
And that they'll spend 20 years, and you don't know that even if he's convicted, you don't know he's going to get the death penalty. He could just get life imprisonment anyway. So you don't know that you're going to get that sentence. So in that sense, if you're not going to get that sentence, or you're not going to win on appeal, so in that case, you're losing out on that. For me, the most disappointing part is I saw today a blurb saying that he's not going to be allocated, which that to me is the real.
What does that mean?
Allocution is when a defendant gets up there and admits their guilt and tells over their story. The benefit to the trial from a justice perspective, a morality type of perspective, at least from our culture here, our Western culture, is that the victims and specifically their families have an opportunity to actually feel justice being done and express themselves if the guilt is found, basically telling him how they feel in a sentencing. They're
still doing that, right, Joe? They're still doing the victim statements.
The victim statements.
Impact. But I think Steve Kaylee's dad put out this, he gave a statement beforehand saying, like, I want to know all the details. I won't feel justice, basically, unless we had gone to trial and gone through everything. And so I think there is this sense that it's robbed. I mean, it's weird because it's uniting people who thought Brian Kohberger possibly didn't do it, along with families who were saying, we want all of the answers. We want to see all the evidence. We want to know everything. And a lot of it, I mean, it's gag ordered until the 22nd still, until we get to sentencing. But even then, there'll be questions that everybody has that we'll probably never hear about.
But here's the thing, though, I don't blame these families for feeling that way. That's very understandable. It's very understandable. The reality is that if, in fact, this trial were to proceed, you almost certainly would find out very little more than you already know. He's not going to take the stand. You don't expect him to take the stand. It's very unlikely he will. So you're not going to hear his story. So all you're actually going to get is, here's the evidence we have. He was in the house. Here's a woman here's a roommate who was probably on drugs at 2:00 in the morning, very sleepy, who says she saw a guy with bushy eyebrows. It
was you, Joe.
Well, and she's known to be someone who draws eyebrows. Like, that's a facial fixation she's interested in.
I mean, here's a sheath with his DNA that we're positive wasn't taken by someone in the car with him. Because how do you know that beyond and look, I'm not saying he didn't do it. If you ask me, gun to my head, did Brian Kohberger do it? 100%. Yeah. Every time I'll say yes, for sure. Does that mean that we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it, which is the burden the state carries? Yeah. No, that doesn't mean we can prove that. Even if you all really, really, really think it's probably true, that doesn't mean I can get unanimity that there's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And just because there's a sheath from a weapon which has his DNA on it, if you're the defense counsel, you're like, so how do you know that they didn't have someone in a car with him who went in there and did this, and they took Brian's knife?
It was just really touch DNA too, so it wasn't even, it's the most spurious kind. I mean, he could have picked it up in a store and never even owned it, and it ended up there. You could explain that away 1,000 ways.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder too if you could comment on if you thought he would be able to get a fair trial, because I always wondered, even if he was convicted in court, if he'd go back on appeal and say there were so many leaks, even though there was a gag order, I couldn't have gotten a fair trial in the state of Idaho because they were able. I mean, the reason it was moved was because Ann Taylor, his defense attorney, was able to prove to the court that the jury pool in the Moscow area had basically seen too much news coverage to be able to select a full fair jury.
Well, to be fair, there's a phrase that was coined by law of self-defense, I think, which is appeals are for losers, and that's because you only appeal when you lose, and your chances of success on appeal are very low. And we don't find that type of appeal based on unfair trial, that this community is the wrong place, tends to be successful at a very high frequency, because they tend to assume, well, it's probably just as bad anywhere else in Idaho. So who's to say that it had any? You have to establish that this is what was the determining factor. It's a very tough burden to reach. I assume that's the standard. To be fair, I'm not a criminal defense attorney, and I've never had to deal with that appeal. I assume that's a standard. So if I'm mistaken on that, I apologize. But the point is that appeals in general, I don't think that that's the concern. More to the point is appeals tend to go for 20 years. They go for literally decades. And here's a horrifying thought that another attorney friend of mine pointed out to me, which I was shocked about when he's written a book about why we should abolish capital punishment. He said something, you know what percentage of people we put to death we sentence to death are later proven to not have beaten the guy?
It's non-zero. I know that.
Yeah.
It's not non-zero. It's like 20%.
Whoa.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Between 10 and 20.
Even 1% is too much.
1% is too much. 20% seems insane, and it makes you question. Then when I heard that, I was like, yeah, everything I always thought I knew about capital punishment just went right out the window.
Joe now confirming there's a 20% chance that that John Wayne Gacy was innocent.
That's exactly what I just said. If you understood what I was saying.
Yeah, he's a really good reporter.
Put it on the headlines.
I mean, this, I think, is one of the reasons that, like, when you're listening to the appeal hearing today, the judge goes through very carefully to say, like, are you intoxicated? Are you being coerced? Are you being promised anything? Are you admitting that you're guilty because you are guilty? Because you don't want him to come out later and be like,
right. And
this is something I think about a lot. It made me rethink the approach to plea deals in capital punishment cases, because Kohberger's team fought so hard to get the death penalty off several times.
I don't like it as a negotiating tactic to force people into. There's something that I promise I'll get you out of here in the next 5 minutes, but Hannah Claire brought up.
And talk about this. I can see it.
I know. Hannah Claire convinced me with the whole.
I'm not sure whether you're throwing me off or I'm the one bolting, but there's definitely something.
No. I just, I don't like to take too much time. But if you do go live after this, I will raid you. I've got like Jay Dyer coming on next, and then I'll raid you. But
please send him my best. I'm a big fan of Jay Dyer.
Well, you want to stay on when he's on?
Know who he is. Jeremy has no idea who he is.
You could stay on when he
Jay
comes on.
Dyer is?
Yes. Shame on this man.
He's legit funny.
All right. Well, if you want to stay on for him, that's Hannah Claire really had me at. She's a conspiracy theorist. She spends a lot of time on like the 4chans and stuff like that,
weaving tinfoil hats.
Yeah, she said the craziest part of how quickly these murders were supposed to have taken place. That part is weird to me. That everyone was killed in under 10 minutes. Like, that would be hard for me as a juror. Am I representing your conspiracy theory correctly, Hannah Claire?
Yeah, it's something like either 10 or 15 minutes that he entered the home, immediately went upstairs, attacked 2 victims, came down, attacked 2 more victims, and left. And it's just an incredible turnaround. It's
and
not
he sat down to take a rest during that.
That's what NBC Dateline has proposed, and I lean on it heavily because they obviously had an inside source and leaked to what the prosecution was going to argue. But I mean, it's not that it couldn't have happened. It's just that it's one of the reasons I would have liked to see the trial, because it was such a horrible crime. It's so sad for the victims, but also it must have just happened in the blink of an eye. And we know that because of the times that the girls were on TikTok or texting their friends, or when the roommates were calling each other. And obviously, like, people go out of their way to defend the roommates, but it is upsetting that they were in the house calling each other, being like, something's going on, and then didn't call the police until 10 a.m. the next day. Like, there will always be things about this case that feel unsatisfactory.
Yeah. But I guess that doesn't mean that he didn't do it, right? Someone
That's
had to have
true.
done it. Someone presumably.
Get him, Joe. Get her, Joe.
I would say, so is that a defense for Brian Kohberger, or are you trying to say that these murders didn't actually happen? You see what I'm saying?
I just tried to say, like, as open.
Maybe it was
like
two
I said,
people.
I went in being like, yes, this guy probably did it, but presumption of innocence. And then hearing all the evidence come out, and it just has felt so weird. I just wanted to see it argued out in court, because it just is such an exceptional circumstance for everything to line up this way. I think the question is, like, the short amount of time makes a lot of people who think he wasn't alone feel more certain that he couldn't have possibly done it by himself. But, you know, like,
oh, so this is like a Clockwork Orange type of deal where you have this gang of maniacs who are basically going into a house and being like, let's do some murder.
Right. I mean, it felt weird to me that the case, it looked like the prosecution was going to lean on, like, this guy is a psycho and he just always has been. He ordered his knife when he lived in Pennsylvania, knowing that he wanted to commit murder. I mean, you know, that kind of psychopath, it's not that they don't exist, but they are actually kind of rare.
Yeah.
Well, what about
rarer still is the Clockwork Orange type of, like, murder cabals, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
If you tell me which one is more likely, I think the individual psycho is what we see more frequently than here's a group of psychos who basically are reenacting the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I just we don't see that in real life very often.
We don't see either very often.
Well, what about
fortunately, I think that's
good.
Yes.
Yeah. Didn't the other guy who's the other guy you had a big crush on, Hannah Claire, the guy from Florida?
I'm married. I don't have a crush on other men. You get out of
Didn't
here.
he take out like 4 college girls and in like really short order?
Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy. And then like went into somebody else's house and then killed them too?
I
Like,
mean, it's
that
not
all
that it
happened
never
very
happened,
quickly too.
but it is one of these exceptional cases. And again, I just really feel for the family.
I don't get why he didn't kill the other 2.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
the
especially if hypothetically he saw one in the doorway, which has sort of been ambiguous in the police reports, some of the testimony. But I guess that's the point of criminal law. You don't get all the answers you want all the time.
My speculation is that whoever did this felt rejected by those girls.
Yeah.
That's my speculation. And
he had some sort of fixation on women too, like on college girls. And
the whole criminal justice background is definitely something that just reads out of a novel. Like, you know, the fixation on crime and stuff like that. Who wants his
master's advisor is a famous true crime criminologist, and apparently now she has said that she wants to study him, which people have said like he did.
That's what he wanted.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
Hannah, watch out for whoever your TA is, and when you start that true crime class.
Yeah. Well, at least stay on their good.
Get out of the pool! Side. Get out of the pool!
I'm glad I had a lawyer comment on this.
Get out of the
away.
pool! Not that way, the other way. Yeah. I think I'm a black guy watching a movie. As I'm predicting Hannah's future. God forbid.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, so I think as professionals, we're all very disappointed.
Yeah.
Also, you know, obviously, we're never going to know why he did it. It's my prediction he'll be dead by the end of the year. That's usually what happens to these guys when they go into prison.
You're making that prediction about a bunch of people lately.
Well, I'm just saying there's a lot of clout in killing a guy like him. And it's basically happened a bunch of times. Obviously, it happened with Jeffrey Dahmer. These high-profile killers that go in, they generally don't last very long. But everyone make sure you go check out Joe at Good Lawgic, Lawgic. It's linked in the description. It's pinned in the chat. And if you're live after this, I will send everyone over to you for more in-depth coverage on this. We'll probably have this afternoon at some point the judge's decision on bail. Or on, not bail, but what do they call it? The sentencing provisions or something.
5 p.m. Eastern. It's been scheduled for today, later today.
5 Eastern.
5 Eastern is what? That's when they're supposed
4
to be.
Central.
That's the bail hearing.
That's when I thought the bail hearing was supposed to be ongoing already.
I thought it was at 1, is what I heard.
That's what early reports said. It was 1 p.m. Eastern. So,
because they had to have their letters. They had to have their letters to the judge
by 1.
By 1.
Oh, so letters in by 1, and then sit down at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Now that's making me feel guiltier for not going in to actually hear their arguments.
Did you stream during this?
I did. I streamed this morning. And
how are you in the socialist hellscape known as New York City? Like that right there is the total. Like I should have.
You could still go in.
I
Joe.
used to live there.
It's only 2.
How do you do it through all the bedlam, homelessness, pee, trash, crap, graffiti, and migrant crimes everywhere around you all the time?
Well, I actually live in the adjacent socialist hellscape known as New Jersey. I grew up in New York.
I could hear it in the accent.
Yeah, I'm like, how do you not know he's from New Jersey? Like,
No, I'm not from New Jersey. I grew up in New York, but I'm
Dirty
saying,
Jersey.
Yeah, but I've been living in Jersey now for 20 years. So yeah, but I grew up in New York, and
I did too.
Mamdani is a disaster. Obviously, I think I'm preaching.
You come back and talk about that.
Oh yeah, you can have a lot of fun with it. I was amused by the fact that he had an accounting glitch in his projections. That he was like, we can use the Fresh NYC program to fund these supermarkets, and that'll give us the 190 million. And they're like, Fresh NYC is 3 million. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Oops.
Oh.
Off to a rough start, you know?
Yeah.
That's socialist math right there for you. So,
Right. All right, Joe. Well,
thank you, brother.
If you're live,
yeah,
thanks for coming on.
You keep trying to push me. I don't expect I'm going to be going live until this evening, but I love hanging out with you. We should do this again soon. Next time there's any sort of law thing, political thing,
you'll be our guy. You'll be our guy. We'll bring you in anytime there's a legal case. Everyone go sub to him, follow him in on Rumble. He'll probably be live tonight though.
Yes, 10 p.m. I should be live tonight.
Yeah, so all right, check that out. Thanks, Joe.
Later, brother. Have a good one. Godspeed. Great meeting you both, Hannah and Luke. Take care.
Hannah
Nice
Claire.
to meet you.
But yeah.
It happens.